All right, everybody, what's going on? And welcome to another edition of SWAC Talk, the show where we cover the SWAC inside and out. I'm your tour guide around the SWAC. See Wells coming at you. And I just wanted to jump in the mix, man. Everybody's been dropping their preseason all conference teams. So I wanted to drop mine. We got media day coming up in a few weeks. So I wanted to go ahead and put mine out there and see, how close I get to the media's choices when that comes out. Also, I'll be starting my 12 team season previews coming up in the next couple of weeks. So I'll do an individual preview for each team leading up to the start of the season. So that'll be there, and I'll have some recaps of media day, and talk about the SWAC predicted order of finish when they drop that as well. So we are coming into football season. We're entering the final month without any football, so without any college football. So make sure you check it out. So with all that being said, you can see the socials on the screen, scrolling away down below, so you can check those out. Facebook obviously is Swag Talk, Instagram is Swag Talk, Twitter Swag Talk 76, and email is swagtalk76@gmail.com. So make sure that you check those out at your leisure. Also, make sure that you subscribe to the channel and hit that hit that notification bell so you can be alerted to any content that I upload. Because I'm dropping more videos, not on my normal Wednesday and Sunday schedule. So make sure you hit that notification bell so you can know when things drop. Like this video here. This video is dropping on Monday. So make sure you check that out, because obviously it's not a Wednesday and I'm dropping a Swag Talk episode. So make sure that you check it out, and that way you won't be out of the mix when things drop. So that's all the introduction, housekeeping, whatever you want to call it, so on and so forth. So we're just gonna jump into this, man, and it's not gonna be a very long show, but I just wanted to drop my teams, and I'll give some numbers and things behind why I put people in certain places, and always good for discussion afterwards. So make sure you hit the comments and let me know how you feel about these picks and who you think may be there, may not be there. Also, um, disclaimer: no guys who are based. Nobody on my team is anybody that's new to the conference. So no transfers who haven't played in the SWAC already. No incoming freshmen. Because I mean, obviously, I could fill this up with a lot of new guys, but I wanted to recognize some of the guys who are coming back, that had great seasons last season, and recognize them. So at the end of the season, obviously everybody's eligible, and this is just for me. I don't know how the SWAC is going to do theirs, but I just wanted to throw that out there so you don't see somebody on the list. That's probably the reason why. Also, this is not, obviously this is a preseason list. A lot of things can change between now and the end of the season. Some of the guys I may list may not have great seasons coming up. So, it's possible that somebody doesn't have a great season. So that doesn't necessarily mean that I have them on this list now, that they'll be on the list at the end. That also doesn't mean that I feel like these guys are the absolute best at their position. Some guys may be better. They may not have the numbers at this point to overcome that. So there's no knock on anybody who didn't make the list or anybody who didn't make first team. That don't mean that they couldn't have made first team. Sometimes it's just the way you feel like slotting guys, and that's where I stand on that. So with that being said, we're gonna jump directly into this, and we'll start with the quarterbacks. I chose to use one quarterback, two running backs, two receivers, a tight end, and the five linemen as my offense. So that's what we'll start. And obviously this could be either or. And both guys have a case for first team. But I chose to go with Shedeur Sanders as first team quarterback. He is the reigning freshman of the year, and he was the Jerry Rice Award winner. So obviously it's only right to recognize that, and he's gonna get better as this season. So I wanted to recognize that. Numbers: 272 completions, 413 attempts, 30 touchdowns, 8 interceptions, 3,231 yards. As a true freshman, started all 13 games, And, obviously the offense was kind of up and down due to the line not being the greatest and the run game wasn't the best. But he put up very good numbers. Kind of slanted down the last couple of weeks, but, still put up numbers and made some big crucial plays to win games for JSU. So, I mean, obviously that's kind of a no-brainer type of guy. My second team quarterback is Andrew Body, and he can, that's an argument can be made that he can be the number one guy. He can, end of the season, he could be the number one guy. He's a potential first team All SWAC guy at the end of the season. He played in 10 games over the season, 139 completions, 237 attempts, 11 touchdowns, 4 interceptions, 2,017 yards. Really, it was a very solid season. Also was a really good runner last season. He's a guy who can definitely use his legs as a weapon. He was actually the number 7 rusher in the conference last season with 98 attempts, 642 yards, and 5 touchdowns, average 6.6 yards per carry. He actually led TSU in rushing, so that's a guy who can do both. And, he will continue to do both, and he's only going to get better. Like I said, he didn't start the first couple games of the season, but as he came in, that offense got to clicking, and he is a guy who can easily be the number 1 quarterback in the league. So I love these 2 quarterbacks. I think they'll battle it out throughout the season, and that game in Houston between JSU and TSU could potentially be a very explosive offensive game. So both of these guys, like I said, you can like one over the other, but they're both great quarterbacks, great young quarterbacks. They're both sophomores, so they're both still learning on the job. So that's a great position to be in. Running back, I had a multitude of options, and if you remember my video earlier in the year about the SWAC 2022, the year of the running back, it truly is. And I had like 6 guys that I could choose from for these spots. The first team running backs were Caleb Johnson from Mississippi Valley. I feel like that's the best running back in the conference. The guy, a lot of people don't really know him because he plays for Valley, but the guy was the only 1,000-yard rusher in the conference with 1,018 yards, 235 carries. He averaged 4.3 yards per carry and 8 touchdowns. He was a guy who everybody knew who was getting the ball at Valley offensively because the offense didn't have a lot of weapons, and for him to still put up those kind of numbers in an offense that everybody knows that he's gonna get the ball is a guy who's very consistent. He makes he can bust a play, he can catch the ball. He didn't really get a lot of catches, but he did have 1 receiving touchdown on the season. A big touchdown against North Carolina Central to actually win the game. So that's my number 1 running back in the league. I love that guy. He's a great player, man. Great person too. But really, really good running back, and to me, the best running back in the conference. My number 2 my other first team guy is Garrett Quarles from Alabama A&M. 205 carries, 955 yards, 4.7 yards per carry, 10 touchdowns. Guy can catch the ball in the backfield as well. He's a guy who will be very involved in the pass game for A&M. He can run the ball. He's a smaller guy, but he can get in and out and make people miss and bust one at any time. He's a guy. A&M is the kind of team that they typically like to have one guy carry the ball the bulk of the season. So for a guy his stature to be able to rack up 205 carries on that offense and be very productive, is obviously a guy who's gonna be a factor. I'm expecting to be a big factor in the offense this year as they're breaking in a new quarterback to start this season. So he would definitely be a guy who will get some touches. The second team running backs, that's where my decisions had to come in. My first guy was Nico Duffy from Alcorn. He had a solid season, a really good season. Alcorn's offense wasn't necessarily where we all thought it would be in the season, but he still had good numbers. 160 carries, 831 yards, 5.2 yards per carry, 4 touchdowns. Was a guy who can make, he made big plays all year. Alcorn was a team who was, not as consistent as we thought, but he definitely was a weapon, and he will continue to be a weapon. So he's my first second team running back. This other second team spot, I had three guys that I wanted to choose from, and I'm gonna still recognize the other two guys kind of as an honorable mention type. I went with Ladarius Owens from Texas Southern. I like that 1-2 punch that TSU had toward the end of the season, and Ladarius Owens is a guy who can definitely carry the ball for you. He had 83 carries on the season, 624 yards, 7.5 yards per carry, and 5 touchdowns on the season. So, really good numbers. That's a nice 1-2 punch in that backfield with Andrew Body. Also, a guy like Ja'Cory Howard's back there as well. So they have a very good backfield, and I thought he had a really good season. A lot of people didn't really recognize the work that he put in this past season. So it's only right for him to get noticed. And I think that he will be my second team running back, my second one. Now, my other two guys could have easily been in that spot. Although I didn't put them in that spot for various reasons. My first honorable mention running back is Kobe Dillon from Southern. 79 carries, 629 yards. He averaged 8 yards per carry, and which actually led the SWAC in terms of guys who have enough carries and 4 touchdowns. So, like I said, this dude was a guy who didn't even start the season as the starting running back. He was pressed into service due to some injuries and so some situations like suspensions because of targeting to Devon Ben. But he came in and first game, I think he had like 85, 90 yards against Valley, and then he had that big game against Pine Bluff. So he put up big numbers, but I don't think he's the best back on Southern's team, and so I think he's gonna probably end up may not get as many carries because I think Gerard Sims is the guy that's gonna get the bulk of the carries for Southern. But coming into the season, I thought he could make that list, but I still think he has some work to do to get on that all conference list. But he's a very good guy. First, we came into Southern as a quarterback, so he wasn't even on the on the list as a running back. Was pressed into service and did a really good job. Kind of had some ups and downs, as he still learns the position, but if he gets the carries, then he can possibly be a guy who you can recognize at the end of the season. And my other guy I like a lot is Jaden Stewart from Prairie View. He had 132 carries, 654 yards. He had 5 yards per carry and 7 touchdowns. Again, he split time with Lindamian Brooks, but he was like the bigger back out of the two. And he was the guy that would get those yards. And, he had a 100-yard game against A&M, Texas A&M in their second to last game of the regular season. So, that, that's nothing to shake a stick at, especially when their offense did not move the ball at all through the air in that game. So he's a guy I expect, he can easily be an all-conference guy if he continues to develop. He was only a freshman last year as well. So there's a lot of young talent in this league right now, especially in the backfields of these teams. So, there's a lot of guys who could have made this list. I'm sure I probably left off some people who, you may feel like should have made the list, but these are the 6 guys that I like the most, and the 4 who I picked for the first and second team, and my 2 guys who I chose in this situation to be honorable mentions. I'm gonna do the same thing with receiver. I'm gonna have a couple guys who could have easily made this list. I'm gonna throw them out there. The first guy who I have as my first team receiver is Abdul Fattah Ibrahim. Guy's electric. I mean, he's been a guy who's put up big numbers at A&M since he's been there. He was a walk-on at A&M, and he's been putting on great numbers since he's been there. Obviously, this season, we're going to see how he does, with a non-Akil Glass quarterback. But I'm sure he's going to be a security blanket for whoever plays that position. 67 catches, 1,008 yards, 8 touchdowns, long of 81. He averaged 15 yards per catch. So, guy is he's a monster. He's a nice sized guy. He can catch the ball. He can run. He can do anything that you need. So, that's definitely my first team all conference guy. Second team, my second team guy, I'm gonna go with CJ Bolar from Alcorn. Really, really explosive guy, man. He was basically, in terms of recognition, he was the second guy on Alcorn's offense in the pass game behind LaCharles Pringle, but he was statistically, he almost finished better than Pringle. He had 41 catches, 676 yards, 5 touchdowns. He had a multitude of 100-yard games, made some big catches in all those games. But he's a guy who I think is gonna explode this year. Again, all corners, they're gonna have a new quarterback, and they need somebody who that quarterback can trust. I think he's a guy that your quarterback can trust in that situation, and he will make those plays for you. My next guy is my second team guy. I'm gonna go with Xavier Smith from FAMU. He returns for another season. Has 64 catches, 713 yards, 3 touchdowns on the season. Numbers, weren't as great as they were the year before, but he still, is able to make plays. And that receiving core is still loaded. They may have a new quarterback. They may have McKay as quarterback. We don't know, but whoever is the quarterback, this is a guy that's going to be able to help them out. He can make some catches, and if you saw him in the spring game, he can do a little bit of celebrations too with the cheerleaders. So that's a guy that I like a lot at that position. My second team guy, I'm gonna go with a guy who came on late in the season, doesn't have, as far as catches and yardage, doesn't have crazy numbers, but he knew how to get in the end zone. He actually led the league. He tied for the league lead in touchdowns, and that's Malachi Wideman from JSU. Big body guy. He's an athlete. He plays on the basketball team. He's a leaper. He can catch the ball, man. He's a red zone threat. He can jump ball it. He can make some big plays. 2 big touchdowns against Southern to basically win that game for them. He had on the season, he had 34 catches, 540 yards, and 12 touchdowns as a freshman. So he's gonna only get better. Like I said, once he really puts things together, he's gonna only get better. So he could have easily been a first team guy, but I chose to put him at the second team. No slight to him, because I love Malachi Wideman, man. And if you listen to my basketball shows, I love that guy. And I think he can easily be a first team guy if his numbers continue to grow. I mean, obviously 12 touchdowns as a freshman is just amazing. So you can't really top that. But he's a guy who I put in that spot. So those are my first and second team receivers. Another couple of names that I like were Jeremiah Hickson from Alabama State. That's under the radar type of guy. He had 43 catches, 568 yards, 4 touchdowns on the season. And Ja'Cory Rankin from Valley, he has 42 catches, 682 yards, and 4 touchdowns. He is a speedy guy. Valley doesn't really throw deep a lot. They like to spread you out and, do a lot of slants and flare routes and things like that, and get the ball to their guys out in space and let them make plays on the move. So he definitely is a guy who I like a lot. Any of these guys could be, an all-conference type of guy, but those are the guys that I went with. My tight ends, I chose my first tight end was Kamari Averett. That goes without saying. He's a guy who can really put up big numbers for you. He's a big guy. He was basically Bethune-Cookman's offense in some ways he was basically that offense. He returns for his senior year, and he's a guy who can make some plays. He had 52 catches, 888 yards, and 10 touchdowns with inconsistent quarterback play. So if they get the quarterback play that they expect from either Jalen Jones or Trey Simmons, I think he'll be able to put up even better numbers. Also, they are going to be a better offense this season. So I expect a lot from him. My other tight end, and there were a couple other guys who could have made this list, but I like this guy a lot. I think he'll be. He didn't really. The passing offense at Southern wasn't really the greatest last season, but he still was a very consistent and solid guy, and that's Ethan Howard from Southern. 29 catches, 320 yards, 11 yards per catch, 4 touchdowns. He's a guy who, he came on strong in the spring season, had a really good season. Like I said, the passing game wasn't as great last season. but I think he's a guy who can be that guy. Jaron Johnson from TSU is another name that you could throw out in that spot. He had 32 catches, 467 yards, and 3 touchdowns. That passing offense is definitely going to be solid. It's only going to get better with that young quarterback that they have at TSU, and those receivers are going to make plays. So Kendrick Johnson, also from Alabama A&M, is another name that I could have put on the list, but those are my 2 first and second team tight ends. Offensive line, Mark Evans is the best offensive lineman in the league right now. You see his name everywhere right now. He's picking up accolades left and right. A lot of people feel like he may be the best draftable guy in the league right now. What can I say? He's a guy who's gonna definitely be playing on Sundays at some point, so he's an easy choice in that aspect. Drake Centers is also a returning all-conference guy on the offensive line. So he was also first-team all-conference at tackle. You have Jonathan Bishop from Southern and Robert Austin from Alabama State, and also Dallas Black from Southern rounding out the first-team offensive line. Second-team offensive line, Kobe Lewis from Prairie View, Tony Gray from Jackson State, Tyler Thomas from Grambling, and Rodney Luckett from Mississippi Valley. And Brian Williams from Southern round out the offensive line. So, that's a very solid 2-deep offensive line. Those guys will definitely open up holes for your running game and protect your quarterback to the fullest. So, really great group of guys right there. And, I love to recognize those offensive linemen because they don't get the recognition that a lot of people really feel like they should get. Moving on to the defensive line. This is probably one of the better positions that the league has right now. So you really you have your pick of guys in this position. I started off Isaiah Land. Some people may put him at linebacker. I put him at defensive line as an edge guy, but he had 23. He had 23 and a half tackles for loss on the season. 25 and a half tackles for loss on the season, which led the league. He also recorded 19 sacks on the season, which led the league. And he is the returning Buck Buchanan Award winner. So obviously he's a guy, he went into the portal at FAMU, but he decided to come back. And that's definitely a big move to help them out on that defense. Another guy I like a lot is Sundiata Anderson from Grambling. Really a guy who kind of, burst on the scene last season. He had 10 and a half tackles for loss on the season. And let's see. And he also recorded 5.5 sacks on the season. So he's a guy who I expect to really be a solid player for Grambling. He really, Grambling's defense was underrated last season. A lot of people look at what their offense did last year, but their defense was very solid. Their defense kept them in a lot of games that their offense really struggled in. But I expect him to be even better this season. Also on the defensive line, I like Jason Dumas. He played at Prairie View last year, but he's at Southern this year. He's an all-conference guy. He had 17 and a half tackles for loss last season, and he recorded 8.5 sacks on the season, which is actually third in the league in total sacks. The conference uses sacks per game to rank their guys. So he was fourth in the league in sacks per game, but he was third in the league in sacks. And he's a guy who can, he can rush the pass, he can stop the run, and he's going to be a valuable piece for Southern's defense. Another name I like is Ronnie Thomas from Valley. He had 6.5 sacks on the season, and he was a guy who really caused some trouble on that Grambling on the Valley defensive line. He also had 8 tackles for loss on the season. Valley's defense was, I like to call them salty. They weren't the greatest guys as far as the individual group, but they never stopped playing, and they got after you all game long, and he was definitely the key member of that unit. So those are my top 4 guys. The next couple guys I had are Jordan Lewis from Southern, he didn't have a great season last season. He battled an injury off and on through the season, played in 9 games on the season, but he still recorded 10 tackles for loss on the season. And he still recorded 5.5 sacks on the season. Not quite the numbers that he had put up before, but he battled injury all year, and he really expected to be better this season. Gentle Hunt is a guy in the middle of that FAMU defense I like a lot. Was a young guy. He had 5 sacks on the season, and he was really a guy that plugged up a lot of holes in that line. That defense was very, very good, and he made, he did a lot of the dirty work for that defense. And he also recorded 8 tackles for loss on the season. And one more name I'll throw out as my second team guy is Tony James from Prairie View. Prairie View's defensive line was very, very good last year, and he was another vital member of that group of guys. I expect him to be the guy on that offense, on the defensive line this season. He recorded 4.5 sacks on the season, and I think that he will. Troy James. I'm sorry, I called him Tony. My apologies. Troy James. He's a guy I expect to be very good for Prairie View's defense this season, and I really look forward to seeing him in action on that defensive line. Moving on to the linebackers, of course, first guy on the first team I would name is Aubrey Miller from Jackson State. He was second in the league in tackles per game. He led the league in total tackles with 109, 53 solo, 56 assisted tackles. Just a guy who is a dog, man. He's a dog out there on that defense. And he also recorded 11.5 tackles for loss on the season. And 6.5 sacks. So that's a guy that, like I said, whatever you need from him, he's gonna give it to you. He's a dog, and he's a guy who is gonna get out after you and make life rough for your offense. My other guy I like is a guy a lot of people may not know, and that's Monroe Beard from Pine Bluff. Really, really good linebacker, man. He was actually 10th in the league in tackles per game with 7 per game, 70 total tackles on the season, 37 solo, 33 assisted tackles. He was very good in the spring. Pine Bluff, obviously, last season they were a team who kind of fell off the map. So a lot of people don't really realize the kind of talent they had. He still had 7 tackles for loss on the season, and just a guy who is a very, very good runner, very good linebacker. He actually had 5 sacks as well. So that's a guy I really like a lot, and I think he is a very, very good linebacker. I expect more from him. Another name I like from a defense that didn't necessarily put up great numbers, but he was a very valuable piece of that defense, and that's Tariq Cooper from Texas Southern. He had 62 tackles on the season, 40 solo, 22 assisted. Like I said, that defense was up and down. They got better as the season went on, but there's a lot expected from that defense this year to help that offense get better. To balance out what their offense is doing. So I expect him to be a guy who would be a key factor on that defense. So I look forward to seeing what he can do. And that rounds out my first team linebacker core. Second is a guy from Bethune-Cookman, to Kevin Thomas. He was that other linebacker, no disrespect, beside Ontario Johnson. Thomas had 72 tackles on the season, 37 solo, 35 assisted. He had 2 sacks on the season as well. So he was a guy who can be disruptive. Like I said, he was playing beside a great linebacker, and that always helps you a lot. He also had 8 tackles for loss on the season, and I like his game a lot. I expect big things from him this season. Claudian Cherylus from Alcorn is my next second team linebacker. Another guy who I expect big things from. He had 69 total tackles on the season, 38 solo, 31 assisted, and a sack. Gonna be a vital factor for that defense. He also had 9 tackles for loss on the season. So Alcorn's defense really needed him last year, and he stepped up in a major way. And The last guy I have is Brian Powell from Grambling. Again, Grambling's defense was underrated. You know, I mean, they were a defense that was very good in spurts. Powell had 12, had 14 and a half tackles for loss, which was good for which was good for fifth in the league. So he really did a great job of getting back in the backfield and making plays and getting stops behind the line of scrimmage. So I like what he did a lot. I expect more from him this season as Grambling's defense looks to get even better. Secondary, this is a group of guys where there's a bunch of names that can really go in a bunch of different places. My cornerbacks, I chose BJ Bowler from FAMU. He's a guy who definitely can definitely make some plays. He was second in the league in passes defended with 16, and he was third in the league with 4 interceptions on the season. So a guy who can make he can make some plays on the ball, and he can be counted on in that secondary even more this season, losing a couple of good Collier and Bell from that secondary. So he's going to be a guy who's definitely going to be counted on. Another under the radar type of guy is Omari Hill Robinson from Bethune-Cookman. He also had 4 interceptions on the season, and he was 6th in the league with 12 passes defended. So he put up really solid numbers on the season. Being a team that a defense that was really put to the test excuse me, last season, because their offense wasn't the greatest, but he really made some plays for them, and I expect to see a lot more out of him. Now, obviously, numbers aren't the only key for a defensive back, but they don't necessarily not tell a part of the picture. My safeties, I like Ershaw Davis from Alabama State. Really good player, man. Really physical guy. A big piece of that defense that they had. He had 67 tackles on the season, and he definitely was a guy that they could count on to make some plays on defense. He also had 2 sacks on the season. And my other safety was Kieran Kinsler from Alcorn. He had 59 tackles on the season, as no sacks, but definitely was a guy who would knock your block off. Just a really physical guy, man. He's a hitter, and I like him a lot. That's the kind of guy a defense like Alcorn needs at this point in time. So you really enjoy what he can do. My second team secondary, I like Isaiah Hamilton from Texas Southern. He's a guy who I think is gonna be even better this season. He's gonna be counted on to really lock down that secondary. He's going to be a good guy, and obviously Deshaun Warren from JSU. A lot of people feel he can be a first-team guy, and he can definitely be a first-team guy at the end of the season. I think this past season, he was more of a guy who didn't get the looks that a lot of guys got, but I think he can easily be one of the better pro prospects in that secondary. So I put him at second team right now, but he could easily be a first-team guy, and I could easily see him finishing first team in at the end of the season. And I chose Trinell Troutman and Shiloh Sanders as my second team safeties. Shiloh Sanders was actually fourth in the league. Well, he tied for second in the league with 4 interceptions on the season. Troutman had 3 on the season. They both are guys who can make tackles. They're both solid hitters. Troutman finished the season with 37 total tackles on the season on a defense that was not that good. Honestly, not no shade, but they weren't. That defense gave up a lot of yards and points comparatively to what the offense did. So I expect greater things from him. Moving on to my specialists, my first team kicker is Jose Romo Martinez from FAMU. He was 17 of 24 on field goals. Longest was 51. He also was a very good punter on the season. He actually led the league in punting at 43 0.4 yards per punt. So, I mean, he can be either or. Definitely a weapon for FAMU. My second team kicker is Luke Jackson from Southern. He's a young guy, but he really finished the season strong last season. He finished the season 7 of 9. He finished the season 7 of 9 on field goals. I mean, excuse me, 9 of 12 on field goals, but he made his last, I think his last 7 field goals. So he's a guy who has a big leg. His longest field goal on the season was 49, but he's a guy who can definitely, improve. He was only a freshman, and I think he's a very capable kicker. Also, Garrett Urban from Grambling is another guy who can be on either list, punter or kicker. I actually put Urban as my first team punter. He's a really good field goal kicker as well. He was 15 or 17 on the season, as long as with 45. Punting wise, I had him at first team all conference punter. And then my second team punter was Orlando Fernandez from Valley, another guy who punts and kicks. Fernandez was a very good punter on the season and a solid field goal kicker as well. He was 11 of 18 on field goals. So all 4 guys are very capable kickers, and there's a lot of other great kickers in the league. So anybody could have been chosen in those spots. But Romo Martinez is probably the best kicker in the league, punting or field goal kicking. So, he could be number 1 in either spot. Everybody else is second behind him. The return game, I did a punt returner and a kick returner because there's a lot of really good return men in this conference. A punt returner, first team was Jamare Shareed from FAMU. He had 18 returns, 358 yards, and a touchdown. He had a 66-yard as his long. And then I chose Robert McMinn from Alabama State. He had 24 returns for 244 yards and 2 touchdowns. So, I mean, he probably could have been first team, but I think Shareed is a guy who is the more consistent guy. He's very shifty. And if you don't touch him, he will bust it for a touchdown or a long game. Kick return, my first team guy is Isaiah Bolden, obviously from Jackson State. 36-yard average. 2 touchdowns, 597 yards, and 16 returns. You kick it to him, you better have great coverage because if he gets loose, he's gone. And there's no second thoughts about that. He is gone. He is probably the best return man in FCS football. So only natural he would make first team. Second team is Darnell Dees from Bethune-Cookman. Very comparable numbers. 17 returns, 476 yards, 2 touchdowns as well. He averaged 28 yards per return. So he's a guy who definitely can, if Isaiah Bolden wasn't at JSU, then Darnell Dees would be your best return man in the conference. But you can't go wrong with either one of those guys. So that's going to do it for this show. Like I said, I just wanted to, come to y'all and drop this on y'all. And I'll catch y'all on Wednesday for our next edition of SWAC Talk. Y'all have a good day and be safe out there. And like I said, I'll catch y'all on the next one. Peace.